Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Waiting to rise again.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
This is the moment you've all been waiting for.
Locking down the middle of the day. Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Friday. Means we're brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp. Got Jacob back and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. Fired up, you're here with us to close out your work week. Hopefully it's already in the rearview mirror. If it's not, we'll get you to the finish line here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. As usual, lots to do on Friday. Preston Guy, TigerBait.com in 15 minutes. I've got thoughts on the Sweet 16 from last night and tonight. We will preview tonight in hoops. Ryan Haydad, Super Talk Mississippi, Thunder and Lightning podcast, covers Mississippi State Bulldogs. He'll join us at 2 o'clock to talk about last night and then moving forward this weekend. We'll talk Saints in hour number 2 and lots on LSU and Mississippi State. That is where we will start today. It's our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Well, LSU was supposed to win the game yesterday because Mississippi State was essentially throwing a sacrificial lamb out there in Evan Sierre, and LSU was throwing its ace. And then, honestly, after 4 innings, LSU probably wasn't supposed to win the game. Your ace did not have it. You were in a hole. The wind was whipping out. Mississippi State was looking confident with the sticks. Like, it was not a good look for LSU. And you've got a multi-run deficit. You're probably not going to use your go-to bullpen arms. Like, things were pretty bleak. And you're looking at that situation, coming off of 2 losses, and you've got Pico Khan coming in the next game, and it's like, this is not great. And you found a way to get it done. And before we dive into why or how, you found a way to get it done. And that's a really important thing. Now, let's start with Cade Anderson, and we'll work through this whole thing. He just didn't quite have it. Todd Walker on the broadcast said maybe it's a day shorter rest. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just a case of a guy that just didn't have his best stuff. Because he was just missing, and sometimes missing big, with pitches we have not seen him miss big with. And he falls behind to one of the best hitters in that lineup, in Ace Reese. And Reese runs it out of the yard on a 2-0 pitch. You don't need to go 2-0 to Ace Reese. Puts one inner half, and Reese hammered it. I'm not too concerned with the home run he gave up in the top of the second when the backup catcher hits it out on a fastball over the plate. Like, I want you to throw strikes to the backup catcher. Not a very good hitter. Drives it out of the ballpark. Okay, you're gonna live. But then you get Hunter Hines 2-0. Sorry, it's 2-0 on Hunter Hines. You work it back to 2-2 in the third inning, and you hang a breaking ball right over the heart of the plate. And if you execute a good breaking ball, you're going to strike Hunter Hines out because he strikes out a ton. If you leave a breaking ball up and out over the plate against Hunter Hines, he's going to crush it. And he did. And that's 3 home runs given up in 3 innings by Anderson. And that's just one of those days where you don't have it and they're putting good swings on it. If it's a Mississippi State podcast we're doing here or radio show we're doing here, you're talking about how great the swings were that you took. It's an LSU show, so we're talking about making mistakes and falling behind. But it's both. It's Anderson not making pitches, either falling behind or not putting the breaking ball away. And then it's Mississippi State. It's a pretty good hitting team driving the ball out of the yard. But Anderson never completely buckled. He didn't drop his shoulders. He didn't lose any velocity off the fastball. He just kept grinding and getting outs because he's got to get outs. Yesterday, I did a whole segment on LSU and how they need to parse this thing out. And one of those pieces is Cade Anderson working 6 innings on a weekend. And it was evident pretty early that wasn't going to happen. But he kept working and kept working and kept working. And he did get through 4 1/3 on a night where he really, really, really didn't have it. And the final hitter that he faced was Ace Reese, who they left him in to face because Reese hits left-handed, and Anderson did strike him out swinging. That's when they went to Binge. I tweeted out, like, okay, you're trailing, but you're kind of within striking distance. Like, who do you go to if you're Jay Johnson? And Binge was the right call. He's not one of your top two guys, but he's certainly not waving a white flag. And Binge did give up the double to Stevens that scored a run. It was a good swing, but he didn't crater, and then LSU came back in the bottom half and erupted. And that's certainly worth mentioning. I was disappointed that LSU didn't do more damage off of Evan Ciari. I just don't think much of Ciari as an SEC pitcher. I think he was out there, again, as I just mentioned, as a sacrificial lamb. It's a guy with a 90, 91 mile an hour fastball who flips a slider over there, and some of them are better than others. But, like, that's not a legit dude, and LSU let him kind of get going a little bit. But you knew, while Ciari was dealing, that, hey, he's going to have to come out eventually. And, okay, that puts some pressure on the coaching staff at Mississippi State. And Chris Lemonis, like, how are you going to handle this? Because you got to get a lot of outs. Do you want to use your key guys? A lot of baseball left. And in the bottom half, you saw walk to Curiel, walk to Jones. That's a no. Because at that point, the score is, make sure my math is right, 6-2. Okay. And you walk the first two guys. And then Burns goes to a 3-ball count to Dickinson. And I will say this. I was a little cranky that Dickinson swung at what would have been ball 4 and fouled it off. And then he swung at what would have been ball 4 again, but he hit it over the fence. So I'll take that 3-run shot, even though it was up and out of the zone. That is really encouraging to watch Daniel Dickinson take a pitch up in the zone like that at 95, 96, and hammer it out of the ballpark. That is the pitch I'm talking about preseason when I hammer the drum. Like, I just am going to pump the brakes on Dickinson for a second until I see it in the SEC. Because I know the tools are there, and I know what he did at Utah Valley, but this is a different sport than Utah Valley plays. Okay? And he's adjusting. Like, he's doing it great. And that is a huge thing for LSU. Because he crushed that ball up above the letters at 95, 96. And that's a pitch that a guy who crushes Utah Valley Conference pitching will struggle to get to in the SEC if he's not adjusted well. And Dickinson is. And it's perfectly fair for you to say, well, you're stupid to question. He's a Team USA guy. He put up monster numbers. Like, he's going to be fine. But he wasn't fine on the Cape, and he wasn't great in the fall. And that told me, like, let's just see. We're seeing now. I didn't say he wasn't going to be any good. I said I want to see. We're seeing. Big swing. You know who I didn't need to see from this year? Stephen Milam. And he's awesome. Josh Pearson, left on left, singles right after Dickinson, and then Milam hits the home run to take the lead. And at that point, the entire thing flips. Because Jay Johnson goes from, okay, Binge is in there, like, what do we do? Do we stretch him out and burn him? Like, do I go to Maverick Rizzi, who had gone down to the bullpen? Like, how do I play this trailing? You get a lead, bring in the horses. And I used plural there, didn't need plural. Because you've got two guys on the back end of that bullpen who are stretched out and ready to eat up innings. You had one of those last year in Herring, and he was Nails. You have two now. So when you get an opportunity to win an SEC game on the weekend, the first time that opportunity presents itself, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever, get them in there. Eat outs, because those wins are gold. And you go to Zach Cowan, and he's just brilliant. Brilliant. And he just makes it look easy. It's got a lot of vibes to, I think, some names you'll recognize. I could dig a little bit deeper, but I know y'all don't grind a lot of other SEC teams. But, like, Chris Cotton made it look that easy. It was an easy windup. Now, he didn't throw as hard as Cowan does, but, like, Cotton's 86 is kind of what Cowan's 90 is right now. It's, you slide it up 8 years, and it's kind of the same thing. Actually, Cotton was back in 2013, so it's been 12 years. That's hard to believe. It's kind of the same type deal with the changeup so good, and he flips the breaking ball over there, and he's always ahead. A lot of weak contact, get the strikeouts. And a guy that I would bring it back to modern times was last year in College Station with Evan Oschenbeck. Like, the SEC is just littered with dudes that throw 97 miles an hour, littered with them. And Oschenbeck wasn't that, but A&M just handed him the ball late in games, said, hey, I need 7 outs. He gets 7 outs. And he was never a huge pro prospect. And he was always consistently in the zone, and he threw a bunch of changeups, and he was great. And that's what Cowan is giving LSU. It's such a weapon, such a weapon. And Zach Cowan's line last night is just sparkling. 4 innings, 1 hit, no runs, 0 walks, 7 strikeouts. He threw 59 pitches, and 40 of them were for strikes. And it's amazing because Mississippi State was so locked in on Anderson. A left-hander throwing 95, 2 different breaking balls. First-round stuff. I mean, you heard Kylie McDaniel on the call if you didn't go to the game. Kylie McDaniel saying, yeah, he's looking, 10 to 25 in this draft. Like, that's what they think of Cade Anderson. Zach Cowan's name is not going to be mentioned like that. Mississippi State was all over Anderson. Cowan comes in, they've got no shot. LSU wasn't great last night, but they did enough to win. And this offense is legit. This offense is going to score a lot of runs. They've got a couple of stoppers in the bullpen, and that's going to be enough to win a lot. I'm probably going to – I want to see how this weekend plays out, and we'll talk more about it down the road. But when I say down the road, I mean in this show and then tomorrow. But I'm starting to frame my opinion on LSU's pitching staff based on the context of the SEC as a whole instead of just what LSU's doing, because it feels like 8-6 is the new 5-3. Now, I'm not going to stamp that right now and say for sure I want to watch another week of SEC baseball, but you're just not seeing a lot of 3-1s. You're not seeing a lot of 4-2s. You're seeing a lot of 8-6s. And I realized that last night LSU threw Cade Anderson and Mississippi State threw Evan Ciari. And I realized that when Liam Doyle pitches for Tennessee, it's usually not 10-8. So it's not a uniform statement based on the entire league, but I'm just telling you that, like, this is a very offensive sport. LSU's offense is really good. The pitching just needs to be good enough to win the games. I'd love to have Skeens out there. But every once in a while, your ace is not going to quite have it. That's just, Jay Johnson said this in the postgame last night. He said, look, I've coached a lot of pitchers that pitch in the big leagues, and they don't have it every night in college. Skeens is different. And Cade Anderson didn't have it last night. And LSU's offense and then the bullpen bailed him out.
I wanted to ask you a few things about decision-wise.
Yes.
Bunting Stansfield in the 5th with 1 out and then sending the guy
Squeeze play,
yeah.
I'm good with.
Okay, and then
Didn't execute it.
Okay, but what about, and then also
Double steals.
Was Cowan's pitch count already too high after the 8th to where you could maybe throw someone else in the 9th and then he could come back on Saturday, or was he already too high to worry about that?
I'll frame it another way. Who do you want out there with a 2-run lead?
Well, I understand, but I just wonder if you could throw someone else and then have him for Saturday.
No, the important thing is you have to win that game. You have a 2-run lead in the 9th. You have to win that game.
Okay.
So last week that discussion was good because it was 8-2.
Yeah.
So it was a 6-run lead. We had that discussion. 2-run lead. Everything you got to win that game. Let's get to Preston. We'll talk about this later. I don't love the first and third play that LSU's running a lot in the instance that they're running it. I like to do that when you're ahead and you're cushioning the lead as opposed to you're behind and you're giving away an out.
Yeah, and Stanfield's been swinging it pretty well.
So we'll talk about some of that in later on. But let's get to Preston and talk some football. That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp.
Friday show is brought to you by Corks, Cajun Fried Fish and Shrimp. It's a Lenten Friday. Great time to get on by Corks. Grab some crispy fried catfish, jumbo Gulf shrimp. Get the combo plate. You can do it po' boy style. They got the crispy shoestring fries as well. I do know that right down the hall, Cade Wassan had lunch at Corks earlier today. He was raving about the bread pudding, said it was phenomenal. So get on by and check out our friends at Corks. They're on Government between Foster and Jefferson. Fantastic Lenten Friday option. Really fantastic option whenever you're looking for a bite to eat. CorksFishandShrimp.com. Preston Guy, TigerBait.com joins us now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Preston, happy Friday to you. How are you?
How's it going?
Going quite well. Let's talk some wide receivers. I'll leave it open to you. Anything that stood out the first 2 weeks of spring out wide?
Yeah, I mean, that's a stacked room. Certainly the noticeable talent difference from this year to last year is there. Aaron Anderson, of course, looks good, and he's probably your best receiver from a year ago. I know some people will sit there and say Kyron Lacey, but I think Aaron Anderson was your best receiver most consistently last year. And, you know, it's not even a surefire thing that he'll be your number one this year, you know. Nick Anderson, they're slowly working him out there. I think that, you know, maybe that's to be expected given he's coming off a, you know, major injury and you have a stacked room outside him. But Barry and Brown looks really good as well. I mean, Xavion Thomas, they're working him in there in a lot of interesting ways. And, you know, to complement the receiver room, you've got two very good receiving threats at tight end. So I think that your receiving options for Nussmeier, even despite losing Mason Taylor, which I'm not saying that either one of the new tight ends are going to be the complete player that Mason Taylor was, but I do think Trey'Dez Green is a little bit better of a receiver. I think it's a really good room we're looking at there.
Yeah, I mentioned, and this kind of dovetails both those two together. I mentioned on the show earlier this week, and then I wrote a column today that talked about the tight end production, how I think it's not going to take a drop with the combined effort of Trey'Dez Green and Bauer Sharp into what Mason Taylor brought LSU last year. And part of the reason I like the tight ends is because when you add Barry and Brown, hopefully a healthy Chris Hilton, and Nick Anderson to the wide receiving core, you've got more deep threats, which I think relaxes the defense and will allow those tight ends to do a little bit more efficient work than that crammed in offense of last year, right?
Yeah, and look, I'm glad you mentioned Chris Hilton because I didn't even forget. I forgot to mention him completely. You know, Hunt, one day people are going to believe us when we talk about the legend of practice Chris Hilton.
I know.
Like, he's so good. He's so good at practice in meaningless bowl games. It's unbelievable. He actually probably looks like your best receiver out there. In fact, I don't know if you remember on one of the Saturday practices, he absolutely leaped over one of the defenders. I want to say it was Jakeem Jackson for an best grab of practice. No contest. So, yeah, no, definitely deep room. And I definitely like your angle you're taking there between Bauer Sharp and between Trey'Dez Green. They'll be able to provide what you got out of Mason Taylor. Of course, they're probably going to run a lot more 12 formation. That means two tight ends out there. The other thing is they're looking to get crafty at tight end as well. You know, I've noticed a lot of just interesting little, you know, reverses and little bubble screens that they're setting up. Just creative ways to implement those two into the passing game.
You mentioned that 12 personnel. Do you like it?
I do like it, particularly if it can be used, if you have one that can be used dynamically to help with the run game, right? I think that's a certain bit of physicality that LSU lacked last year. That being said, look, if you're opening up after a kickoff and every formation is 12 formation on your own 25-yard line, I think your offense needs to get a little more dynamic. I mean, you have more than three receivers you can roll out there. Let's make sure we're not using, two tight ends on the field when you're looking to spread them out and get aerial. Like, let's put Barry and Brown, Aaron Anderson, Nick Anderson, and healthy practice Chris Hilton out there and see what you get. You know, I think that's the thing I don't like about the 12 formation is if it becomes the dominating unit of your offense and you're keeping talented receivers on the bench because of how much you like them.
We talk about system players that are only productive because they've been plugged into this system. What about the inverse of that? Guys who weren't as successful because the systems they were in were so bad. And I think about Berrien Brown and Bauer Sharp last year, and two of the worst passing offense quite literally in Division I, specifically the SEC. Do you think that there's more that LSU can and will unlock with those two guys now that you've got a functional quarterback and system that I think I looked this up correctly. LSU's thrown for more yards per game than anybody in the country the last 2 years.
Is that real? Well, I mean, I guess Jaden Daniels is probably doing a lot of
he's part of that.
with it. Yeah, so I mean, that checks out. But yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Bauer Sharp, by the way, didn't put up a bad season for OU. I think I remember looking at about 650 yards. It's obviously been a couple months since I looked at those stats, but in that offense, I mean, that's pretty impressive. Now, I'll say this: I think where he's going to be limited is he's going to have to, they're going to have to share the wealth with him and Trey-Dez. And I don't think Trey-Dez is going to be your second target at tight end. There's a few other players that come to mind when you mention that. Is it fair to go to the defensive side of the ball? Or is that
sure, fire away.
The one I'm hoping that fits that description is Jack Pyburn. He looks really physically sharp out there at edge. And I'm hoping, that was the guy where he came in and said, I really like his film. I don't know where he's going to play, but that guy lowers the shoulder. He plays physical. He makes plays even when his name isn't getting called out. He's the one who took on that blocker, and I think he had 40 some odd tackles. Nothing that really exploded on paper a year ago. I'm really hoping that a position swap for him. And look, receiver's a really good room. Edge rusher might be your one other room that's actually better than receiver. I'm really hoping that a position swap for him will really make his impact be noticed more on paper, not just, on film.
And I can't vouch for this for sure. I don't have the statistics in front of me, and certainly I'm not going to go back and watch every Florida snap from last year. But based on some of the guys that have come on from Florida that have talked on this radio station since Pyburn came over, they took him off the field on third downs a lot last year. Now, whether that's maybe that's because they've seen him in practice and he doesn't rush the passer well at all. Or what we can't be argued is it doesn't appear that he was given a chance to really rush the passer last year. So hopefully, because Kevin Peoples' expertise there, he unlocks another level to his game, and that's where it shows up statistically.
Yeah, that's kind of the hope there. Now, look, I could be dead wrong, and maybe Florida had him build the right. It's really hard to tell until you get a really good. We'll get an open practice where we get a decent look, but. It's one of those things, position swaps, new coach, all that good stuff. It's really difficult to truly project, at least from a media standpoint, with what we get to see until you line up against somebody. That's why we need Coach Prime to make spring games, intramural spring games a thing.
Coach Prime just got a new contract that's quite lucrative, so I think he can probably help with you with a number of different things. Last one here, Preston. We appreciate some time. Just big picture on the offensive line. Josh Thompson is now back. Not back. He's here. And then you see some shuffling at center when we were watching 11 on 11. So how do you feel about the way that's shaking out right now?
Yeah, a lot of movement on that offensive line. In fact, we've seen Josh Thompson out there at right tackle. Mostly, I haven't actually seen him play much guard at all. I don't know if you've seen something different there, but that caught me off guard. But it's very clear to me that the offensive line is an experiment right now, and they're just looking to kind of see what unit gels the most. This actually kind of reminds me of, remember 2022, we had no earthly clue who was going to roll out there and be the offensive line, and then you look up in game one, it's Will Campbell, a true freshman at left tackle. That's kind of reminiscent of where we're at, where it's like they are looking to shuffle a lot of guys, give them different looks at different spots, and see, because it's not just how good you are at your position, it's also how well you play with the guy next to you that matters so much there.
No question about it. I think he'll be off for spring break next week, but we'll still be talking. Spring football continues here in a couple of weeks. You can check it all out at tigerbait.com. Preston, Mike, the whole crew do a great job. And Preston's with us on Fridays. Have a great weekend, man.
All right, Hunt, take it easy on spring break.
I'll do my best. It's Preston Guy, tigerbait.com. It doesn't feel like spring break at my house. A lot of crying. I don't know if much of that there is on probably a lot of that on spring break with some questionable decision-making from some folks. That's not why there's crying.
You definitely didn't make any questionable decisions on spring break, did you?
No, not a single one.
No.
Not a single one to be had there. Step away on that note. We'll talk about Sweet
The
16.
Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com is the website. Every car that is on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Your buying experience at Genesis of Baton Rouge is going to be luxury in every way. You can go in or you can do the whole thing remotely. Either way, you're going to be treated wonderfully. You're going to be treated like a guest, not a customer there by their brand ambassadors. You can test drive whatever vehicle that you're looking for, and you can do that on the lot or you can do that from home. They can bring the car right to you. You can take it a spin around. They'll show you all the bells and whistles, let you know about all the great safety features that have garnered awards like the IIHA Top Safety Picks, Top Safety Pick Plus in some instances. And then if you want to get that car remotely, they can do e-contracts, digital delivery. You never set foot on the dealership. It's part of being a Genesis driver. Every single car comes with a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty as well. Check out the line of vehicles at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Genesis of Baton Rouge.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp.
A lot of basketball last night in the Sweet 16. SEC teams very much involved. My takes were 2 for 4. I thought that BYU had a real chance to outscore Bama, and BYU scored a lot of points. They just ran into one of those Bama flamethrowers, and Bama has that. We all know that Bama has that in the holster at a given point. We saw it in the PMAC like 4 years ago. I distinctly remember sitting right there near the LSU bench watching Bama just make 100 threes in a row. And they can do that. Now, they set records last night, so it's not exactly the same. But on a given night, you can catch Bama where there is not a team in the country that can stay within 10 points of them. That's just the nature of that style of offense. Now, you can also catch them on a night where they go 4 for 31 from 3, which doesn't happen but like once a year, but it's out there, and they can't do anything. But last night, BYU ran into the flamethrower, and they gave up 25 threes. And that's just, you can't win when that happens for Alabama. So while I was dead wrong in terms of my thoughts on how that game would go, it was certainly with an understanding that Sears and company can do that, and they did it last night. So unfortunately, Bama's going to the Elite Eight, and I need desperately Duke to play its best basketball game coming up tomorrow. So I was wrong on that one. Maryland, Florida, I handicapped exactly right. I thought that Maryland was talented enough to stay in the game early, but that Florida's depth and just quality of play on both ends of the floor would wear Maryland out. And you're talking about a second half that Florida won 47-33. They won the second half by 14 points. It's no surprise that Florida's bench outscored Maryland's bench 29-3. That's what we expected, but it was the second half where Maryland just didn't have the dudes. And then you get Willard up there at the podium after saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's not a great situation there at a Maryland. It sounds like he may be on the move. But that one was pretty easy to call, and Florida coasted to a win there. Arizona and Duke, I thought that Caleb Love was going to have to be awesome for Arizona. Caleb Love was awesome for Arizona. He ended up scoring, I didn't have it written down, but I think he scored 30 in the game. But Cooper Flagg was just sensational. Knipple gets 20, never misses from the free throw line. Duke in the game, shot 60% from the floor and 58% from 3. They run good stuff. They've got the best playmaker in college basketball. They're just so talented, and they're one of the few teams in the country, maybe the only one in this year, that can take their freshmen, and those guys are already ready to go out there and dominate because they're just that much better than the rest of the talent. And so I thought that Arizona was good. I thought their best player was going to have to be great. but I thought that Duke would probably cover the number, and Duke was awesome in the game, and they move on to the Elite Eight, and that should be an incredible basketball game between Duke and Alabama. Arkansas, Texas Tech is the one I want to actually spend more time on, because Arkansas led by 16 points in this game in the second half, and they just couldn't get to the finish line. And there were a couple of things late that I just did not like at all. One comes when Arkansas's got an 8-point lead with just over 3 minutes to go. And John L. Davis, who had a great game, takes a three early in the shot clock with 3:11 on the clock, up 8. And he misses it. And Trevin Brazil rebounds it. And so you've now got a fresh shot clock with just over 3 minutes to go. And DJ Wagner shoots another three 5 seconds into the second shot clock and misses it. You've got to run some clock. You can get that three later in the shot clock. If Steph Curry wants to pull the trigger on that, okay. If Kobe Brea from Kentucky, who shot 50% from three, wants to take that shot, okay. And I'm not advising up 8 with 3 minutes to go that you completely stop trying to play offense. But that possession specifically, I did not like. Now, Cal's catching some heat for not fouling up 3 when Texas Tech tied the game with 9 seconds to go. That is ridiculous because they took the ball with 20-plus seconds on the clock. You can't foul at that point with 9 seconds. Like, that doesn't do you any good. That actually hurts your chances of winning if you stop the clock there. Arkansas defended, did a good job, and Texas Tech hit the shot. Here is a huge beef I have, though. And I will hear the other side, but I've got beef. Texas Tech hits a three to tie the game with 9 seconds to go and immediately calls timeout. So Arkansas's got 9 seconds in the ability to set up. And John L. Davis has scored 30 points in this game. 30. And he doesn't get a touch. I don't like that. That's your guy in that moment. He's feeling it. We know basketball. There's guys that get hot. Give him the ball. He's 30. And instead, you let DJ Wagner go. And look, here's the other side. I'll hear it. I don't agree. I will hear it. All year long, DJ Wagner's been their guy to go get a basket. He's their best off the dribble guy. It's a tie game. They're not going to foul. Like, I get it. I understand that part. I disagree. Give me John L. Davis with a touch on the basketball. And they didn't do that, and I disagree. And so, look, you got beaten overtime. Arkansas was resilient. That's a stinging loss of a 16-point second-half lead and let it get away, especially against a team that doesn't have its second leading scorer on the floor. But a remarkable turnaround by Arkansas, just a gutting finish to how it goes. And I was thrilled because I'm not pulling for Arkansas to move on any further. But I thought that was the most interesting game. The other ones weren't nearly close enough, but there were some tactical decisions that I didn't believe in that Arkansas went to, and it may or may not have cost them, but they certainly didn't win the game. So, Beck, I've gone on long enough. I know you watched a little hoop last night. Any of what I've said ridiculous? I mean, in that instance, just candidly, like for Arkansas, do you go to the guy you've gone to for 5 months, or do you go for the guy you've gone to for 2 hours?
It's hard. I don't know. I mean, you just look at he had 30. He wasn't very efficient. He was 8 for 22. So it's not like he was making everything he was taking.
That's fair.
And yeah, DJ Wagner is a guy they've trusted all season. So I'm okay going to either of those guys. Whoever, and I will say, you would hope that with 9 seconds you could get a good look, and it wasn't a bad look, but I would have expected something a little bit better. But again, this is the criticism that Calipari has had in his whole career. He's never been never been one to make great decisions or been able to coach his way out of problems. And Arkansas had a big lead, and they just lost it. So it was just not a great performance by Cal in that instance. But also, it's tough for Arkansas, but they had a good run. So.
Did Arkansas have a successful basketball season?
Yes, they did. With this being his first year, and they made it to the Sweet 16, I would consider a success.
I would too. I think it's a layered question because it's such a splash when you go get him from Kentucky. And you realize there's going to be a huge NIL push behind it, and there was. You go get Boogie Fland, who's top 10 recruit in the country. You go get Jonas Adu from Tennessee, who'd been a big contributor on good Tennessee teams. You go get Wagner from Kentucky as well that Cal brings over. And you went and got big-time transfers and big-time freshmen. And it started, they were 0-5 in the league, 0-5 in SEC play. And they make the Sweet 16. So I think that's probably, there are very few teams that would be completely disheartened by a Sweet 16 appearance with this group. Like with their current group of players. Most of them are still playing. But I think that it probably still stoked some fire in those in Fayetteville to continue to feed the flame with some money and see what they can do. They've got 2 big-time guards signed in this class. I think it was a success, even though the pill of swallowing that with a 16-point second half lead is a lot. So now you got some really good basketball coming up. You got Florida, Texas Tech. I very much favor the Gators in that game, but Duke, Bama is going to be an absolute treat. It's going to be high octane. It's going to be high in terms of offense, and I'm just hoping Cooper Flagg and the boys can get it done. So we'll see. That'll all come your way tomorrow. When we come back, we'll preview tonight's game. Still got to do some LSU football in the second hour. Still got to talk a little LSU and Mississippi State in the second hour. We'll do that with Brian Haydad of Super Talk Mississippi, as well as the Thunder and Lightning podcast. So don't go anywhere. It's a Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp.
All right, tonight's action in the Sweet 16, one all SEC game, but 3 SEC teams in total are playing. 4 SEC teams are playing, which is crazy. Like if Ole Miss beats Michigan State and Auburn beats Michigan, you're going to have 5 teams in the Elite Eight from the SEC, and that does not include Arkansas, who lost in overtime. It's nuts. Ole Miss is playing Michigan State. I know a lot about Michigan State, weirdly, because I studied them a little bit when I was writing a story on LSU. And Michigan State was one of, at one point, 4 teams in the Power 5 that shot threes worse than LSU. I was like, are you serious? Well, then how are they any good? Well, it's pretty simple. They don't shoot very many. They rebound like absolute mad people, and they make a lot of twos. And they make a ton of free throws.
So you mean a Tom Izzo team?
Yeah, make a ton of free throws. And this is not a classic Chris Beard team. He doesn't quite have what he had at Texas Tech, where they were like just defensive madmen. They're a little bit better on offense than that, and not quite as good on defense there. But Michigan State is just tough to deal with because they're so good at what they do. So I don't think Ole Miss is going to win that game tonight. I think that Michigan State will win it. That's not a hot take because they're a 3.5-point favorite. But Michigan State's just physical and tough, and they're gonna bring it at Ole Miss, and I like them to win that game. Kentucky, Tennessee, I can very much see either way. They're very different styles. Kentucky's beautiful. Tennessee is a rock fight, and it's just kind of who can impose what will. When they played in Knoxville this year, Kentucky won 78-73. When they played in Lexington this year, Kentucky won 75-64. So Kentucky's won both games. The thought of trying to beat Tennessee 3 times in a year is very difficult for me to try to put my head around. But Kentucky's got to feel pretty good about where they are. Rick Barnes prides himself on defense, and they've allowed Kentucky to score 78 and 75 in these 2 games. And Tennessee's better when they hold teams in the 60s. Like that's the style of game they want to play. I mean, yeah, you can get Chaz Lanier and Zakai Ziegler going, and they can score some points, but they'd really rather win on defense with their offense doing enough. Rick Barnes is still trying to beat down that door to that elusive Final Four that Tennessee has never made it to. And you hate to say it, and I saw Wes Rucker tweet this and write a column about it. These next 3 days are the biggest days of Rick Barnes' Tennessee coaching career, because he has the team that everybody thinks is good enough to win a championship, and he's never knocked down that door. So can you beat Kentucky, who you're favored over, to advance to the next round? And then if you can do that, do you have enough in the tank to beat Purdue and Houston, who kind of play your style? Tennessee's a 4.5-point favorite here. If they lose this game, you're going to have a very upset orange-clad fan base in Knoxville. Very upset. Because they're done winning a bunch of games in November. They're done finishing second in the SEC. They're done looking at 2 and 3 seeds. They want to get to the Final Four, and they haven't done it. And they're as good as anybody in that bracket. But they're going to have to keep up. And Kentucky fans are feeling real good about themselves, and that is going to be ridiculous environment tonight in Lucas Oil Stadium, because Kentucky and Tennessee are both going to bring 20,000 people into that city. It's close enough. Those fan bases are big enough. It's going to be wild in there tonight, so I can't wait to see that. Michigan and Auburn. Michigan's got 2 7-footers. That could, potentially give Janai Broome a little bit of trouble. I like Auburn's guards a ton in this game, though. Chad Baker-Mazara is really good. I think Auburn is just fine in this game. There's a reason they're 8.5-point favorite. I think they'll cover that number. I think they'll win that one pretty easily. As far as Purdue and Houston goes, that's going to be a rock fight. That's probably going to be played in the 60s. And because it's going to be played in the 60s, I think it'll be really close. Painter's a great coach. Sampkins a great coach. Houston's probably got a better team, but I think because you're going to play this thing 68-66, it's going to be close.
It totals only 133.
Yeah, which 68-66 is just over that. So nice call by me. But I think that's going to be the game of the night in terms of competitiveness. Even though I can see any of them being competitive, I think Purdue and Houston's going to be really, really good. So excited to watch. I'm curious to see how many SEC teams can get to the finish line. I'm really only concerned about Duke beating Alabama at this point. The rest of it can fall wherever it may. But it should be a pretty good evening of viewing. For those that are curious on times, 6 o'clock for Ole Miss, Michigan State, 6:30 for Kentucky, Tennessee, 8:30 for Michigan, Auburn, and 9:09 for Purdue and Houston. And while we're on that and have about a minute and a half left till break, the fact that the game last night, the game last night that was played in New Jersey, that Duke game, the second half of that game, New Jersey time, started at 11:20.
Yeah,
That's just stupid.
Yeah.
I know how time zones work. I know how the U.S. population works. I know if you start early, the people in California are still at work. But starting a second half at 11:20 p.m. is dumb.
Yes.
We had 16 teams left. We're playing at 4 different sites. Let's get this figured out to not play at midnight on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Just my 2 cents. All right, that's it for hour number 1 here on a Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Cork's Cajun Fried Fish and Shrimp. Missed any of it? Catch it on demand wherever you find your sound. Hunt Palmer Show. You can also find us Hunt on LSU or Hunt on Saints. Both of those channels, 100% football all the time. So if you want your LSU football fix, Hunt on LSU. Want your Saints football fix, Hunt on Saints. We got to talk some Saints in hour number 2. We also got to talk some LSU baseball against Mississippi State as they'll do battle in game 2 at 6:30. To kick that discussion off, we're going to go to Brian Haydad of Super Talk Mississippi and the Thunder and Lightning podcast. We'll join him at the top of the hour after Sports Center. Hope your Friday's going well. Come back with us on the other side. Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is that website. If you're a business owner, and I say EPL insurance, do you have an idea of what that is, what it covers? If I talk about D&O, is that something that you're well aware of? What about cyber limits? Do you know what your risk is from a cyber perspective? If these are things that you're generally aware of but not certain how your policy might respond to them, contact an expert. The Highland Insurance Group is full of experts. They're an independent brokerage, which means they have dozens of contracts with different carriers. They can make sure your commercial insurance is placed properly with the proper coverages at the right price. Premium's always going to be important. They understand that, but the coverage is the foundation of what you're doing in insurance. The Highland Insurance Group knows that, and they can help you with it. Check them out online at highlandig.com. It's the Highland Insurance Group right here in Baton Rouge. They're online, highlandig.com, highlandig.com.